came across a musician the other day, or rather I was pointed to a musician by a colleague at work, called Pauline Oliveros, I think she's called, something like that. And she has this this concept that she's been working with, which she calls deep listening. And it's a kind of crossover between musical practice and a kind of enlightenment or meditation practice. And she talks about music for meditation, by which she means not music that you listen to in order to meditate, but kind of music that you make as a meditation. And she plays the accordion, which is not an instrument I would normally associate with meditation or those kind of things. But as I say, she has this other idea called deep listening, which is, well, I guess it just puts the accent on the listener, really, and the kind of instruction is to really pay attention to what you're listening to right now. Morning. So that the idea is that you take as many moments as you can in the day and think to yourself, what can I hear right now? Okay, part of that, as I understand it, and I'm really just starting to read about what she's on about, is that she specifies two kinds of listening, well, apart from this deep listening concept, which is an overarching idea, or two kinds of awareness in relation to listening. What she calls focal awareness, I think, and one she calls global awareness. And in a sense, this is what attracted to me, or drew my attention to in the first place, because she represents focal and global awareness with the symbol of a circle with a dot in the center, which is one that I'm quite interested in for other purposes, really. In which, and she uses that symbol in her notation for her work. But the circle with the dot in the center represents these two complementary modes of listening, two complementary modes of awareness. One of which is focal. So you consider yourself to be, if I get this right, you listen from where you are, and and you act as a kind of focal point for that listening. So whilst I'm standing here, I'm listening to the sounds of a distant aeroplane, I'm listening to the sounds of birds, I can hear the ripples of the water on the canal. But all of these sounds I can hear, I've got kind of relationships to them. They're located in space, in a relational space, and that relationship is with who I am and where I'm standing, and I am the focal point for the various lines drawn from those locations. So the sound of the car I can just hear is over there. The bird is behind me. The sound of the canal is there. There's another bird over there, and so on. So all of these sounds kind of triangulate my position as central within that. To represent that, Pauline Oliveros would say, I guess, is to represent the focal point of that sonic awareness as a dot. Global awareness, on the other hand, doesn't try to disassemble the sounds and locate them in space in quite that way. I mean, I guess you would have to acknowledge the location in which those sounds are being heard. But if you try to listen globally, or to apply global awareness to sounds, instead of kind of non-consciously thinking, I am here and I can hear the sounds here, here and here, arranged in space around yourself as the central axis in that experience, you just try to listen to all the sounds as a kind of total experience. It reminds me of two practices, actually, doing that. One thing it reminds me of is an essay by Krishnamurti called Listening to the Silence, again, it's a listening exercise, but the idea there is rather than listen to sound, you either listen to the silences between the sounds. So, for example, when my kids were small and they were babies and they would cry a lot, I would kind of get through that experience by listening to the silence in between those cries and kind of inhabit that space. That's one kind of realization of listening to the silence. But the other is to place one's attention not on the sounds that are around oneself, but on the kind of backdrop from which they're arising. Because all sounds arise out of silence. At least that's the idea. So whilst I'm listening to these birds and cars in the canal water, there's a kind of substrate of silence against which these sounds are becoming co-present with myself in my listening. And that's something John Cage writes about, actually, in a really beautiful book called Silence. Okay, so that's the one thing. The other thing it reminds me of is to do with not so much silence as space. There's a little book called by Susan Blackstone called something like The Enlightenment Process, and some of the practices in there, they're kind of meditation practices, but some of those involve trying to place one's consciousness, one's awareness, not so much in one's body, or not solely in one's body, but in the space around one's body. So you start off thinking of yourself in various parts of your body, just putting your consciousness in parts of your body, which is very straightforward. And then there's various exercises to extend it, so you feel yourself to be present, not simply in your body, but also in the space around it, and then you can extend that, so you kind of feel yourself to be present in the whole space, the space of a room perhaps, or maybe extending through the room. And then you're kind of reminded of the fact that space doesn't stop at the surface of your body or stop at the walls of the room, but permeates the body and permeates rooms. So you're kind of identifying with space itself in that model, and delocalizing one's experience to become, if not global, at least extended. And the last thing, which is related to that really, is to do with space, and that's this really nice little pamphlet by the Buddhist Society, I think, called Noticing Space, in which in that you just kind of, again, you're kind of invited to be aware of the space that you're in, really, and not take it for granted. Not just look around and see trees against an emptiness of sky, or see clouds. These are the objects. You notice the space. And then as you notice the space, then that realization that space permeates objects. And there's this kind of consistent singularity that runs through experience, is intended to be a kind of prompt for certain modes of thought.